As you heard this afternoon, the main mitzvah of Hanukkah is Pirsum Anisa, to publicize the miracle. And the Rebbe spoke very strongly about the concept of Pirsum Anisa in the early mid-70s. That means in the Chops, the Lamed. It was about Lamed Hay. One of the craziest cities in the United States is San Francisco, in California. Over there, every Mishigas in the world goes. And at the time, there was a Shliach there whose name was Chaim Itche Driesen. Chaim Yitzchak Driesen. Today he's in Florida. But at that time he was, quote unquote, the Shliach in San Francisco. And the big square in San Francisco is known as Union Square. And as such, managed to speak to the Balabatim of Jordash. You can't video me here, too small. Jordash, who are Jewish Boitchiklach, and he convinced them that they should sponsor a Menorah on Union Square. It really went through without a glitch because, like I said, it's a crazy city, it's a nutty place, and every Mishigas goes, so another Mishigas, so there's a big Menorah standing over there. Nobody paid attention to it in terms of governmental officials. Nobody paid attention to it, and Baruch Hashem, the year went through, and it was nice. And once again, the Rebbe spoke about the concept of Pirsum Anisa, and this is a big thing. As a matter of fact, after the fact that it happened, there were some Balabatim in New Jersey who had problems with it. Because, you know, in America there's a concept called the separation clause, or the separation of church and state, of religion versus the government. And they literally came to the Rebbe with a taina, Hayitochen, the Rebbe is pushing a thing that is against the American Constitution. And the Rebbe wrote them a long 2-page letter in English, explaining what a Menorah is and the importance of the Menorah, and there's no violation here. The following year, I decided, if I haven't spoken about it so much, obviously it would be very nice if we would have a Menorah on Fountain Square, which is the public square in Cincinnati. And it's interesting, you cannot do anything in city limits, on city property, without having, obviously, a permit. So I went down to City Hall, explained to them what I was looking for, and I got a permit right away. They didn't even say anything, didn't say boo, nothing. I'm okay. So I figured out, this is good, this is going to go through pretty smoothly. But sure enough, God helped me, that the minute they did so, the Jewish community, as usual, it wasn't the Goyim, it was the Jewish community, or what they call in the Federation circles JCRC, the Jewish Community Relations Council. These are the Jewish organizations that carry on the relationship between Jew and Goy, and they're always very sensitive to anti-Semitism and to who knows what. They all of a sudden, one good day, popped up to the city and started screaming at the city that I'm a lone Mishugana, I'm a nut, and who says that this is for the Jewish community? Nobody in the Jewish community wants it, only myself. 2 days later, I get a letter. The letter is now on city stationery, reversing itself, that what we told you, yes, is removed. There is no permit. You're not going to be able to do so. And there will be no menorah on the square. So I picked up the phone right away, and I called the guy, the person whom I spoke to, which was the city manager, and I said to him what all of a sudden happened, and he explained to me that the JCRC, who do represent the whole Jewish community, said that I was a Meshugana, and it's nothing, and it's therefore there will be no menorah. I said, I want it in writing. Although you did write me already in writing, but you basically only wrote the negative. I said, don't forget you have a Christmas tree and other ornaments and other garbage on the square, and I would like to know what the difference is, and you're discriminating against me as a Jew. So I get another letter from them, again explaining itself, that the permit is revoked, there is no permit, there cannot be anything on the square because there is a separation clause of church and state. On Lazovi I had the taina, and there were Christmas trees and other ornaments there, from the paragraph. That the only things that are allowed on the square are those items that are related to the secular holiday of December 25th. Those were the words used. That those are the only things that are permitted, is those things that are related to the secular holiday of December 25th. Now, December 25th is not Hanukkah. I hope you realize that they're not talking about Kislev, Chafei Kislev. They're talking about December 25th. What does a Yidala do when you fall into this kind of a thing? I said, no problem, I'll meet you in court. I went right away and I filed a lawsuit against the city in court. And that obviously, the law is the following. If you are suing somebody, or somebody is suing you, if you're a private person, you can represent yourself in court. But if you're representing a corporation or a company or a charity or whatever else it may be, you have to have an attorney. No attorney wanted to touch this case. Nobody. Because this is it's a nasty one. And to use their expressions, this is going to cause anti-Semitism because, you know, you're Jewish and you're making a stink and you're fighting and blah, blah, blah. I came into City Hall at one point to discuss this matter with some of the city councilmen, and there was a woman that was sitting over there working. And if you really want to know what a politician thinks, don't speak to the politician, because the politician will never tell you the truth. They'll tell you what they believe, what you want to hear, but they'll never tell you what they really want to say. However, this lady doesn't know of any kunsten. In political terms, people like that are called the fixtures in City Hall or in Washington or wherever. They're like fixtures. They sit over there for years and years, and they don't run for no elections, and they don't get fired, and so they're there like for ages. And this lady looks at me, she says, Rabbi, you're not going to see a menorah on Fountain Square ever because this is a Christian community. I said to her, that's very interesting. You're telling me that I can't have it because of separation of church and state, and all of a sudden this is a Christian country. Is that not church? So she chaps up that she said something that she shouldn't, but for me it was good. It was enough for me. So because of the fact that I needed to look for an attorney and nobody wanted to really represent me at that moment because nobody knew where this was going to go, I found an attorney who I told him, I said, look, just come with me one time to court. I don't need you there full time. Just come one time to court and say you're my attorney. I'll do the arguments. You just say you're my attorney, and I'll find somebody, don't worry. I'll have somebody represent me, but just do me a favor because I already filed suit. So what we filed was what's called, in legal terminology, a temporary injunction. Temporary injunction means that the government has to grant you the permission for now until we can find out what the law is. All right. So in the meantime, it's already becoming out of Hanukkah. It's not that we had a lot of time to play with. So if this is the case, that they have to give you the permission, so obviously the judge gave me the permission because it's called a temporary injunction. So in other words, he was really not ruling that it is okay, it's not okay. He's doing nothing. For now, you can put it up, and we'll hear your case later on. And when the later on is, that's the Shnish Negay. That we'll see already as to the calendar of the courts. And we had the first Menorah on Fountain Square the following year, which probably was 1977. Against the wishes of everybody. Now that I got the Menorah with the temporary injunction, now the JCRC came back all of a sudden, and now they're filing suit against the city. It was haste, they allowed. And now the case ends up in front of a judge. However, in between time, in order for me to buy time over here to get the permission from city councilmen, because they are, after all, quote unquote, considered the fathers of this community, so I made sure that one good day I got invited to give the invocation at city council. It's interesting that government agencies, when they start meetings, start with what's called an invocation, divrei bracha. And I made sure that I got arranged so that I would be the one to give the invocation that particular day, and it happened to have been the second or third day of Hanukkah. So I come into City Hall, and the invocation is the first thing that happens before anybody even has a chance to say anything. So here I am. They introduced me to give the invocation, and I basically started with saying, I find this very ironic. You're starting your meeting with a Dvar Torah, which is definitely church and state, but that's kosher. But to have a menorah on the square, which is a symbol of Jewish oppression, that's not allowed. And I stirred up a little bit the pot among the councilmen, and the first one to jump to my aid to help me, and actually even attended that lighting ceremony that we had that year, was a politician who today is sitting in Washington already, and his name was Ken Blackwell. And he actually came to the candle lighting ceremony. And then I also made arrangements that we used to have candle lighting ceremonies in the mayor's office every year, and obviously it became public and so on and so forth. But when this noise began, all of a sudden the entire media harped on it. Every radio station was talking about it. Every television station was talking about it. Every newspaper was printing about it. So, like for the next few weeks, I, Baruch Hashem, had literally going from one program to another, to a third, to television, and kept on going from all over. And if I ever thought for 1 second that maybe Pesum Nissa is not enough, I think I proved myself that Pesum Nissa was doing very well. And everybody, obviously, at this point, the whole city, Goy, Jew, it made no difference who they were, everybody was talking about the Menorah. As a matter of fact, at the end of that Hanukkah, I wrote an editorial, and I finished off the editorial, and I said that since the entire idea of Hanukkah is Pesum Nissa, I re-invite all my opponents to come back and fight me next year again. Because obviously it worked out very well this year. And it was that way. Came the next year, and again the JCRC started their chassanas, and this time they got a little bit smarter, so they they filed their lawsuits against me earlier, and I played my dummy game. Again, I put in a temporary injunction demand because nobody dealt with it yet, but now we're going to deal with it. And they assigned a judge, who unfortunately happened to have been Jewish, to handle this case. And the minute I saw that and heard that, I said, oh, there we go, we're in trouble, because he for sure is going to rule against me. In the meantime, I also wasn't exactly sleeping. So I went and I was looking around for an attorney that I can really count on. Not the local yokel guy, but he was also against it. All the Balabatim were against it. It was not good. And in the meantime, I'm writing all this to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe is pushing, like, you know, keep on trucking, boy. You're on the right track, go. So, when that happened, I found a famous attorney in Washington. This is before he was running around doing all the things for Chabad, not Louis. I called him up. I knew he was a frum Jew. I knew that the Rebbe had with him a relationship. I knew also that the Lubavitcher Rebbe actually helped his father out of Europe. In other words, he's really not an American boy. He's a European guy, he's a frum guy, he learns the Daf Yomi every day, and he's a real frum guy, but he's made it big into not only a local basis, but into Washington and into the Supreme Court and all over. So I figured, you know what, maybe he could be of some help. So I called him up, and sure enough, he said, yeah, he hears me, but he says to me, Rabbi, you're never going to win this. You're never going to win this because a church and state issue is nothing. They can say day and you can say night and they can rule, and yet it'll still mean nothing and finish. But he said, I'll try for you. So he came to that year to court with me, and he's arguing the church and state concept and so on and so forth. And the judge rules the following, that yes, it's church and state. However, if this is part of a larger secular scene, then you're allowed to. That was his ruling. It's part, in other words, if you have the half level of dollars, if you have Santa Claus with his reindeer, with all this chazarai, which the government considers secular. So if I'm part of a larger secular scene, I'm all right. Okay, fine. But when it came now to fighting, the third year around, now they really got angry, because here it is, I've got it already 2 years up. They're all screaming on the Talmud. The judge already said that it is a question of church and state, and I'm still having it. What's going on? So this time they really went bonkers, and they decided that they're going to fight me in whichever way possible this can be. They're going to make sure it doesn't happen. And no matter where I went, if I went to the radio, they were there. I went to the TV, they were there. I went to city council, they were there. Wherever I went, they were following me, and they were trying to rebuttal everything that I was saying. So we're standing in a courtroom, the third year around already, because obviously it wasn't 100% capacity. It was just sort of, and you can appeal this. So I'm sitting now in the Court of Appeals, local Court of Appeals yet, and I'm trying to appeal the ruling. And what did they do? They sent a Reform rabbi to represent the JCRC. So I'm the expert witness on my side, and he's the expert witness on the other side. And he's saying on the witness stand, he's saying, "What are you talking about? It's a holy thing. It's really religion, and so on and so forth, and therefore you're not allowed to have it." So now comes my turn to respond to him. So I asked, I said, "Your Honor, I would like to find out what constitutes making the menorah a holy item. What makes it religious?" So the rabbi said, "What are you talking about? You make a bracha." Right? When you light the candle, you make a bracha, so that's holy. I said, well, may I ask you a question if you don't mind? Religious Jews make a bracha when they come out of the bathroom. Is that also a religious act? Obviously, he had nothing to answer. Because make a bracha. If a bracha is what constitutes it. And I said, Your Honor, I just want to point out something to you. A siddur, prayer book, is a holy object. When you use the prayer book, you're not allowed to throw it in the garbage anymore. If it gets ripped or something wrong happens with it, you have to bury it. There's a whole procedure of holiness to the book. I said a menorah the next morning after you use it on Hanukkah, or even during Hanukkah, if you get yourself another menorah, you can throw it in the garbage. Where does this say? I mean, so what makes this holy? Well, because it looks and it came and it this and that. I said, listen, sir. What I'm finding out over here is that these guys, they're big experts, don't really know what this means and what religion is and what this is all about. Because they're calling it a religious symbol because, you know, it's after all. I said, Your Honor, I am a religious symbol. As a clergyman, I am a religious symbol. And if you're going to paskin that you're not allowed to have a religious symbol on public property, I'm not allowed to walk in the street. So in other words, every rabbi is not allowed to walk in the street because we're all religious symbols. So again, at the Shliach, you have what to say, and they were fuming because every time this came up, they were just starting to look like fools more and more, and it was getting a little bit out of hand. But Nat Lewis said to me, Rabbi, listen, it's a waste of my time, it's a waste of your time, it's going to go nowhere. The guy told you already if you have it as part of a larger secular scene, you're okay, so what do you care? So you're part of a larger secular scene. I said, no. We're going to walk out of here that this is the case. And one of my best friends in Crown Heights, Rabbi Krinsky, basically had a whole talk at one of the kinnusim that year, and was talking about to learn from the Shliach out there in Ohio how you got to fight a battle because the Rebbe wants it and ain't playing it. Well, that was good. But anyway, it kept on pushing and going this way crazy that I realized that this is not going to work. That's not going to work. In the meantime, the Menorah is up every year. But it's not going to come to a resolution because you'll say like this and they'll say like that. Bottom line is, in the meantime, during this period of time, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, decided to put up a Menorah too, but not Lubavitch. The city, there was a Jewish city councilman who decided that they're putting up all the other Chazarai, that maybe it would be nice to have a Menorah there too. Who is fighting him? Again, the Yiddelach. And again, they went to court, similar to here, and at the same time, interestingly enough, is that the person that was fighting, representing this individual was a Jewish woman, an attorney, a Jewish woman, and she was fighting why there should be a Menorah. The following year, this woman became mayor. So now she's fighting against the Menorah. Last year she was for the Menorah, this year she's against the Menorah. So this is why I'm saying I became convinced that running this kind of a battle and this kind of a fight is never going to bring it to an end. I'll have the Menorah, but it's not going to bring it to an end. So I concocted an interesting thought. And I said to Nat Blue, and I said, listen, Nat, I have a suggestion. Let's try it. He says, what? So I said, let's forget about church or state. Church or state is not the answer. It's not going to help anyway. I'll say it is. It's not religious. They'll say it is religious. It's not going to bring a resolution. She says, so what? So where do you think you can find a resolution? I said, I have a tremendous suggestion. I said, my suggestion is that we should fight it on the basis of freedom of speech. He looks at me like I'm shaking his head. What kind of a freedom of speech do you have here? I mean, you're a nice guy, but you're a rabbi. What do you know about law? I said, I don't know much about law, but to me it makes sense that there's a flag in the United States, And we say that we salute the flag, and it's not a religious thing. And the reason for that is because the flag symbolizes freedom and liberty for all. That's the symbol of the United States flag. So I said, so fine. So my Menorah is the equivalence of their flag, and the Menorah basically is speaking and says that this is freedom and liberty for all Jews. The Jewish people were oppressed. They couldn't do mitzvahs. And then we won the battle with the Maccabees. So this is now the symbol of a little light dispels much darkness, and it's the message is freedom and liberty for all. So if it's good for the flag, it's good for me. So my Menorah speaks too. Thought about it. It doesn't sound bad. That's pretty good for a rabbi. Then let's take a crack at it. The minute we started the battle with the concept of freedom of speech, that was the end of it. That finished them off in Wisconsin that they couldn't fight it, because in America, this is the Constitution. Freedom and liberty for all. This is already, your freedom of speech, you can't shut up. In other words, as long as you don't come in to a theater, as the expression is, and shout fire and scare everybody, you have a right to say anything you want. And Asher Alkin, I'm not saying kill the president, I'm not saying do anything wrong, then why should my freedom of speech be taken away from me? And you guys are taking, if you don't paskin that it's 100% kosher, you're taking away my freedom of speech. And sure enough, we went back into court the following year, and as I said, in the meantime the Menorah is up, in the meantime everybody is going crazy, and while this battle is going on, once again I get invited to City Hall to explain to them this concept of freedom of speech, because that was a good twist for them, because at this point not only was the JCRC fighting me, now City Hall is fighting me already. So between the two of them, because they obviously made a yadachas, and they want to understand my point of view of freedom of speech. As I come into City Hall, JCRC is there behind me. I said, before I'm going to say anything, and before I go to speak, I would like to make a confession here. As a rabbi, as a clergyman, I should be believing in creation versus evolution. After all, I'm a rabbi. The Torah says, in the beginning, God created heaven and earth, so creation. I said, but as of today, I've come to the conclusion that probably evolution is true. And they went nuts. First of all, how does this fit into the whole subject matter? And second of all, a rabbi is believing in evolution rather than in creation? I said, yeah. I said, yes. I said, what do you mean? How could that be? I said, what's the difference between evolution and creation? Creation believes that God created a world, and in the world he created this and created that, and then on the sixth day of creation he created man. Evolution, we say that we all come from monkeys, right? I said, wherever I walk, I see a tail behind me. The JCRC. No matter where I am, there's a tail. So I said, listen, maybe I was wrong all these years. Maybe how can we come from monkeys? I have a tail. They never came back again. That was the last time they followed me anyway. But it worked. And when I told Matt Bloor the concept of freedom of speech, he said, okay, we're going to come in the next year. But you see, the problem why these things drag so long is because, you know, between Hanukkah and Hanukkah there's a year. So in other words, it gets hot Erev Hanukkah, and it cools down after Hanukkah. So then for the next 11 months, it's quiet. Then it comes again a month before Hanukkah, and again the noise begins. At this point, we went to the circuit, to the Court of Appeals, and I won, based on freedom of speech. But the city wasn't given in. So they decided to go further. The one place further that they could go is what's called the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals. If you guys know the system in America, it's a little bit of what Yisro taught Moshe Rabbeinu how to set the system up, that there are judges that handle local, and then if that doesn't work, you go a little higher, then you come to Moshe Rabbeinu. And that's how the American system works. There's a local court, Then there is a court of appeals, but that's still considered a local court. Then you have what's called circuit courts. In other words, the circuit court basically deals with the area. Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals deals with several states: Ohio, Indiana, Kentucky, Georgia, Michigan. All these little states that border us are part of the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals. So now the next year we're in the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals, which in of itself is a beautiful scene. In the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals, they have 13 judges. It's not one judge, it's not two judges, it's 13 judges. And each judge that comes is a judge that's coming from one of these states. In other words, it's represented by all that circuit, by Kentucky, by Indiana, by Ohio, by Michigan. So they're all represented there. And obviously, everybody's sitting in the court, and then comes a parade. 13 judges with the long gowns, with the whole thing, come marching in, and they sit down on the top in a little bit of a semicircle table. And now they're listening to the case. So I made my presentation. The city, well, actually, the city made theirs first because they're the ones that are appealing what happened before. They make theirs, and I respond. And now the judges are debating it among themselves. So it's mamish like in a yeshiva. You know, this one says like this, and the other guy says like that. And they passed them again in my favor. So we're good, yeah? Now became a shaila. Since there is a concept of separation of church and state, you have to put up a disclaimer on the Menorah that the city has not, government has nothing to do with it. So on top of the Menorah, there has to be a sign that says that this Menorah is funded with private funds, not with city money. Good, yeah? All right, so we printed up a disclaimer. That's okay. But the next thing that happens, and that really caught my attention very much. There became a debate among the 13 judges. What size does this disclaimer have to be? Is it okay that there's a little sign, you know, 2x2, 4x4, a small little sign that says this menorah, this display is funded by private funds or by Chabad and not by government funds? Or you really need, and I want you to hear these words because this is a key factor, or does the disclaimer have to be big enough that a speeding vehicle should be able to read it? Which means like a sign. I don't know if you've ever seen the signs on our menorahs. If you recall from last year, there's a big sign that says Chabad wishes you a happy Hanukkah. You talk about a sign. So in other words, is it sufficient that you have a little sign that says the sign, the disclaimer, or do you really need such a big sign? In other words, the debate among these 13 judges is what was the intent of the framers of the Constitution? I'm going to deviate for a second because I think this message is extremely important. I made sure to point out in the court that afternoon something very interesting. I made sure to point out that when the Constitution was written, there were no speeding vehicles. 200 years ago, or 214 years ago, 218 years ago, there was no Constitution. There was no speeding vehicles that were around. So why would somebody think that the framers of the Constitution had in mind a speeding vehicle? There was no such thing. Elamai, could it be that if there was a speeding vehicle, would they have had that in mind? So the theory is gewaldig, right? I said I just want to make a point. And my point is that in the Jewish community, there are Reform Jews. And this is the cradle of Reform. And the Reform at that time were still claiming which they retracted since then already, and why I played a role in it, but they retracted this already. They were claiming that there's really no God. And there was really, therefore, no Torah on Matan Torah and Har Sinai. And therefore, Moshe Rabbeinu was a nice guy who wrote everything down on his own, and he did a pretty good job. And therefore, today, you don't have to observe any Torah mitzvahs, especially the modern things. For instance, driving in a car on Shabbos, opening a switch on Shabbos, because Moshe Rabbeinu could have never known about it. So if that's the case, then sure you're allowed. Okay, if it's something that Moshe Rabbeinu could have thought of, you know, maybe taking strings and then turning it around your arm, okay, so he knew how to make strings. But to say that he knew about electricity, he didn't know about electricity, so therefore it can't be that he thought about this. But that's I would like to make my point that since we were thinking today, the honorable judges were talking about the intent of the framers of the Constitution, that they had in mind a speeding vehicle when there was no such thing. Why couldn't Moses have in mind electricity despite the fact that there was no such thing? Why is this good and this not? Which again, anybody that was sitting in that courtroom, and these rooms were used to get packed because everybody knew that this was a nice scene to watch. It was entertaining project. It was just if anybody needed entertainment, especially if it was a journalist, that was the best place to be. And this made such hush in the courtroom that it was like, wow. Anyway, we won again. So now we're already at the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals and we won. This was the by now we're talking already 1990. Shinun. And I, basically before I left, I warned loud and clear the court that if they are going to follow me again and reapply, I'm not going to go to rehash the whole thing in court, but I'm going to sue them for every penny the city has. Another lawsuit has nothing to do with the Menorah. They heard me loud and clear. And this is really where it was interesting. They heard me loud and clear, but at the same time, by then it was already a nitzochen issue. If you learn the Maimah of Bossi Legani, you know that the Rebbe talks about over and over in the strength of the concept of nitzochen, that the Melech wants to have the nitzochen, and for that he gives away kol hoin that he has, and the oitris of Avaisov, and she'otzra Avaisov, and so on and so forth. So at this point, these guys were not ready really to give up. And the next level of the court at this point, as it was ready to move up and may have gone to Washington, that's where the break came. It was the next year, 1991, and they were ready to go fight again. My threat was standing. I didn't let it get away. And how should we now make sure that there's no problem? So what did they do? They were very shrewd. As you heard from Rabbi Haftzin, by Mincha, that year, Hanukkah came out literally Erev Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving is always a Thursday. So what they did was they went and filed on Wednesday afternoon with the machshava that Thursday everything is closed. Friday was the first day of Hanukkah. So they figured this time they got me already. What am I going to do now? I'm going to get temporary injunctions. Everything is closed. The courts are closed. Everything is closed. This way they got me, and emo faralamo they won. When I saw that, I said, okay, so we just have to fight it a little bit different, that's all. Sure enough, they filed late Wednesday afternoon, and I say late because like 3:30, and the courts close like at 5, and the next day is already Thanksgiving, and Hanukkah is the next day. So, I mean, you're really stuck over here. And by this time, Matt Lewin is back in Washington, where he lived at the time, and he's not here either. So for a minute, I was trying to decipher, what's the route that we go here. So Lubavitcher still has chutzpah. I called up Matt Lewin at home, and I said to him, listen, the judge in the Supreme Court that represents the Sixth Circuit, at that time was a judge called Souter, I said, you know what, why don't you call him up and tell him you want a ruling from him. Tell him what happened. Tell him that it's already, we're battling this thing already almost 20 years, and it's year after year, it's the same garbage, and year after year, it's always a last-minute deal. And we've been winning. We've been doing pretty good till now, so we really want him that he should offer the last-minute injunction. She said, yeah, but it's Thanksgiving, it's one of the big chagos in America, so it's not so easy, I feel uncomfortable. I said, listen, if you're not going to do it, I'll be in Washington tonight. I'll just fly in, and I'll take care of it. So all that I'm asking you is do me a little favor, save me a few dollars and a few hours, that's all. I mean, let's not make a mishigas over it. I said, listen, where's your Jewish pride? Where's your Jewish pride? This is a matter where you'll make the biggest Kiddush Hashem if we can reverse this now, before we start lighting candles. He got the guts, and he went literally to the guy's house, and he knocked on his door, and I told him, just ask him first if he finished his turkey. Let's make sure. And if yes, you want to help him for a few minutes. And he went to him, and he told him the story. And he said, look, you have to, I mean, you can't just let this go, because even the Sixth Circuit already passed it in our favor. And, they were not playing fair. If they would play fair, we have time to run around the court and say, okay. But if they're not playing fair anyway, so we got to do something that's not fair either. And right then and there in the house, as he was, he pulled out a stationery of his, and he wrote that there would be allowed, in other words, he overrode everything that anybody else had before, and he wrote that yes, he's granting the permission to override the Sixth Circuit and everybody, because now this is in court again. So for now there could be a Menorah, and after Hanukkah we'll hear the case. Finished. I said, please fax it to me, which he did. So I had the letter, I had the ruling, and ich mach sich nicht lustig, I'm not making any noise about it. Comes Friday morning, the truck comes, we take the Menorah, we put it up, and they're going crazy because they can't figure out for the life of them, because City Hall knows that it's in court, and everybody knows it's in court. So I mean, how did we do this one? But it's went up. And what I did to back it up is locally there is a judge, a Jewish woman. She comes from an Orthodox home. I'm not going to mention the name for now. Some locals know who that is. And I said, you have to help me here. Because if they're going to make a tumult, I need you to back me up. I mean, after all, this is the Supreme Court. Although there was no official hearing in the Supreme Court, but who needs it? This is it. This is a psak. So she told me, okay, no problem. I mean, I had her at my Shabbos table many times before, so we know each other well. And she said, not a problem. And so she had that in mind. She wrote a backup to that Supreme Court thing. And sure enough, the minute they saw everything going up, they went crazy. They went crazy. So Friday, even though, which is what worked in my favor because it was a long weekend, Thursday was Thanksgiving, so the courts didn't open until Monday. In the meantime, the Menorah went up Friday. And I have her letter, and I have their letter, and somebody could have said that I may have falsified the letter from the Supreme Court justice, but hers, they know. I mean, she's here locally, and in order to make sure that nobody's fighting me about this on Friday, she came along with me to Fountain Square to watch the Menorah go up and approve it, right then and there, which was in of itself a mitzvah. Anyway, Monday morning, those guys wake up, the Menorah state, and they're crazy. So what could they do? So they filed in the Supreme Court. They filed a taina against him. Hayitochen, he went and paskin without a sitting, without the entire Supreme Court on the case, which was a very tiny tzedekis. I mean, after all. Anyway, he found a heta. He wrote it down on Biksav that what he did was 100% correct. This is the Supreme Court, and this is the ruling, and hey, yok. So really, that was the last battle that we had to have with a Menorah at all. By that time, we were talking already 1992, which now the city calls me already every year. So when are you putting it up? And you know, for when do you need the permit, and for when do you need the this, and what else is going to go on? Are you gonna have food over there? Are you going to do this? Do you need a microphone? Do you need the screen, and so on and so forth? Now they're already asking us to use the Rebbe's own expressions, to work along with us. Everything turned around, and in every case around the United States, and there were many cases after this. Michigan had a case. Grand Rapids, Michigan had a case. Georgia had a case, Rhode Island had a case, Vermont had a case. There were many cases that came up after that, and now in New Jersey there's a case now, this year, there's a case. Everybody basically uses this case over here as the guide how to overcome their problems and not to have any issue because of freedom of speech. So the Rebbe to help them, that we should light up the world with the Menorahs, and we should light up the world with Inyan Mashiach Geula, and we should light up the world that the Rebbe should come enough before Hanukkah and take us all out of Golas together. Amen. Amen.
Wow, what a